Welcome to Milton and King's On the Wall podcast, where we engage in conversations with artists, designers, and more. Today we speak with Australian artist and designer Fleur Harris. If you enjoy these conversations, please subscribe and consider leaving us a rating and review. Hi, Fleur.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. It's nice to actually speak to you.
So how was your weekend?
It was good. I'm renovating a house at the moment, so I'm just in full renovation mode. Picking up secondhand furniture and testing paint techniques, and
Is this so?
It's very DIY.
You moved into a new home?
Into a period 1908 Edwardian in Melbourne.
Wow.
That needs a lot of love.
So is this like a second home, or are you fully just as your only residence?
Oh no, this will be our forever home.
Oh, okay.
And we're in a rental just down the road, so that's been really handy. It's too big a job for us to live in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I've been following some of your posts and stories, and I'm watching how you basically kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah, totally. We've kind of ended up just building a whole new house, basically. We're in a heritage area, so not only do we have to keep the facade, but I want to keep as much of the original home as possible. So
what prompted you to want to do this?
So we had looked for a home that would suit our family for a long time, and we were in a beautiful little house around the corner, actually, another period home, but we'd outgrown it. And because my studio's at home and I take up a lot of space with my work, I needed a bigger workspace as well. And we just couldn't find the sort of house that we liked, I suppose, in the area that we wanted. So we, when we saw this one in between Melbourne's big lockdowns, and I grew up in a home that had really high ceilings and was a period home as well. And so I have just a real soft spot for homes like that and a love for the grandness of their interiors. And so when I walked into the home that we ended up buying, I could see it needed a lot of work, but I just went home and said to my husband, I didn't even ask him. I just said, I'm going to put an offer on this house. It's really the perfect house for us. And fortunately, he's very trusting of me. So I went ahead and did that. And, we were fortunate to buy it. So we bought it sort of just in the right time when the market was still a bit hesitant. And I think because of the scope of work that this house required, it also deterred a few people as well. So I think the stars really aligned for us to end up with it. And yes, 3 years later, we're finally underway, and we're probably about halfway through now.
Because housing's a bit crazy in Australia right now, isn't it?
Well, there's a housing shortage, a crisis in that regard. Homelessness is a huge issue. And in addition to that, rent is expensive, and housing prices are really expensive, and building materials are really expensive. So to have a safe and secure and suitable home in Melbourne is becoming more and more challenging for people. I suppose if you're trying to find some positives in that, it may bring some people out to more rural areas and bring some life into smaller towns that could use an uplift in businesses, bring some more trade to small businesses that otherwise wouldn't have had a lot. But it's a real problem in Melbourne, yeah. So I feel especially fortunate under those circumstances to be in the position to have a home to be able to renovate.
Yeah. Have you always lived in the Melbourne area?
I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula on a vineyard down there, and then when I was about 18, moved to Melbourne. I'm 42 now, so the best part of my life has been in Melbourne, and I love this city.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd want to live anywhere else. I'd give it a go, but for now I really love it here. It's got everything. Good food, most importantly.
Yeah. So how far are you from like the city center?
As the crow flies, about 3.5 k's.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So you're in the mix of it all.
yeah. That's what we love about it. Is it feels like a country home. Like I've got a beautiful cottage garden out the front that I've been creating over the last few years, and we don't have any high rises or anything around us, so you feel like you're not close to the city at all when you're there, and it's very
Mm-hmm.
quiet. But if you want to go and get into the city, it's just a short tram ride from the end of the street. So it really is perfect. It kind of plays into my love of the countryside, from growing up on the vineyard, but then also my love of the buzz of Melbourne City.
Yeah, it's a very artsy city. Lots of wall murals, lots of good food.
Yeah, it's so cool. And so many amazing creative people live here and work here. And there's an incredible community of creative people that offer each other a lot of support, whether they know each other well or not. There's, social media has obviously facilitated a lot of connection and networking between creatives. I suppose there's just a really nice community of creative people in Melbourne too. Everyone I've come across is really warm and giving of their time, and I try to do the same, and that's a really nice atmosphere to be a part of as a creative person too.
Do you think outside of sort of the artistic community, do you think that there's anything about growing up in Melbourne or around that area that influenced you as an artist?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula, it's a beautiful place, but it was it felt like another world, like quite sheltered from the rest of the world. We had not a lot of people from countries outside Australia at my high school. Even though there was like over 1,500 students there, it was kind of lacking the sort of cultural influence that Melbourne has. And so when I used to come up to Melbourne as a teenager, I would catch the train up, and I, would be presented with what felt like a whole new world, and it was so exciting for me compared to where I'd grown up.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned before, all the wall murals and graffiti and things like that. And I was also really into punk music and going to little underground record stores
Oh,
and
really?
things like that. And that just all kind of came together in Melbourne in this really perfect way for me as a young, curious person.
Yeah.
And so coming to the city was always so exciting. I'd get the train up, I'd go straight to a record store called Missing Link, and I would trowel through, CDs and try and find, new bands I hadn't heard of before. And then I would,
What were
you
some of
know,
your favorites, by the way?
oh,
Because I think this will actually come as a surprise, because I think when people look at your designs, they're not going to think punk rock. So I think this is really, really interesting.
I suppose I'm just picturing myself now in Missing Link looking through, and there was an album by a band called Better Than 1,000 that I just used to have on repeat.
Better than
It was
1,000?
yeah. Your audience, when they listen to it, look, I hope they enjoy it, but it's not for everyone. I love it though. And that was just one of many bands that I used to
Who
get
else? I'm
really
just
excited
curious.
by. Oh, let me think. Hot Water Music was a favourite band of mine. I went and saw NoFX recently on their last tour,
Okay.
and they were a favourite band of mine in high school especially. We used to all get together at lunchtime in the art room and, listen to a whole lot of NoFX or all the Fat Records sort of compilations. So, and then I quite like a bit of like heavy metal music as well.
Okay. Let's hear it. Who?
a friend of mine, Tony, has a band called Municipal Waste, and they're quite a heavy thrash band, and I really like them. It's the kind of music I listen to when I'm working out, or maybe haven't had a great day, I go for a run and chuck some of that on. Seems
I
to
find
fix
that
everything.
so cool because I would have not guessed that in a million years.
Well, I suppose that's a nice thing about life is you can, and being human, you can have all these different sides to yourself and be interested in lots of different things where we're not just one dimensional.
That's right. That's right.
And my artwork earlier did used to probably be more reflective of those personal music tastes.
Oh, did that? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And then I suppose having gone through university and then worked in different companies, some small, some big global companies as a designer, you start to fine tune your commercial eye, I suppose, and understand how to connect with customers and the wider community through your artwork. And so over the years, I suppose I refined my style to what it is now, because that's what I find people connect with the most, and it brings the most amount of joy and happiness out of all the artwork that I've created over the years. And in a world that, especially at the moment, is fraught with a lot of tragedy and sadness and horror, I feel that it is something I can bring to the world through my artwork, is a bit of a moment of joy and happiness to people.
A little escapism.
Yeah, definitely. And the messages that I get from people about how it does impact them in that way, and their gratitude for it. The amount of messages like that, it always surprises me and overwhelms me and humbles me, and it's something that in turn I become very grateful for. So it's this kind of, my art seems to create this lovely cycle of gratitude, which I'm very grateful for. It's really nice. I've not met in person, but had dialogue with a lot of people over the years, and who will share some really personal stories with me about how the artwork has impacted them in a positive way. And that's.
Did you have a lot of support at home growing up? Because I'm assuming you were artistic as a young kid. And
I did, in that my siblings and I were often left to our own devices when we were on the vineyard, because the business was a startup, and so my parents were just completely immersed in a whole lot of hard work, physical labour, actually planting the vineyard and then getting the business off the ground. It's a huge undertaking. It's not the romantic lifestyle that people might think growing up on a vineyard would offer. It's dirty and hard work, and but also a lot of fun. Anyway, so we were often left just the four of us playing on this big property, and so we were kind of just able to an extent, do whatever we liked. So my creativity was really untethered, is that the word? Which was beautiful as a child. And then as I got older, look, my dad was a huge supporter of my artwork. My mum used to maybe throw suggestions around to me sometimes, like maybe you should get a job in a cafe or something. But I just knew that, I had jobs. I've worked in retail. I've always worked. I love working. She was meaning more as a career. I think she was probably watching me, try and try and try again. And I have a whole backstory of people saying no to me, or rejection. And she would probably watch that and maybe feel a bit sad, but I just had and still have a dogged determination in me to be creative and make art. It's just what makes me happy.
Well, don't you think that's sort of an important part of growing? I mean, lots of people get told no all the time, and you either get defeated by it, or you learn from it, or you prove them wrong, or you get filled with a fire, or
absolutely. And there were times earlier on, where that sort of feedback would really crush me and it would demotivate me. I suppose, fortunately, it happened to me so much that I got used to it and learnt not to be bothered by it. And I still get no's from people. That's fine. And I just am more of a, okay, what's next? It's really water off a duck's back to me, because I think that what's meant to be will be. And, if somebody says no to you, then it's because they're not the right fit for you. And so in a way, I look at a no these days as them doing me a favour, and I say a little thank you in my heart for the rejection, because I think, well, that's put me on another path that's going to actually end up being better for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it took me a long time to arrive at that mindset, but definitely, as you say, those challenging times and those moments of rejection, if you can learn from them, can actually be really amazing learning opportunities and turn you into a much stronger person, and in my case, artist.
I think also too, tell me if you agree with this. It's almost like walking into a cold body of water, like walking into a cold pool or something, whereas like at first it really stings. And then after a while, like, not that it's never ever like pleasant to hear a no, but you can sort of, like, after you've experienced so many of them, so many no's, you can kind of get, well, and you come out to the other side and you're just fine. After a while you go like, okay, yeah, it's not so bad. Like, it's not the end of the world when someone tells me no. Where like maybe in the beginning someone tells you no and it is the end of the world, but after you've gotten it 15, 20 times, you're just like, yeah, it still sucks, but at the end of the day, you're like, okay, well, on to the next. Like, it's not
Oh,
so
totally.
soul
Yeah.
crushing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, I think you're right. I know, when you go to the beach or something and you put your feet in the water, you're like, whoa, it's cold. But then once you dive in, it's actually a minute later, you're like, this is beautiful in here.
Right.
And it is a bit like that. If you can get past the hard part of it, you can actually learn to make it a good thing for you.
Yeah. And not only is it not soul crushing, but it's just that it becomes sort of like, I guess, par for the course, right? I mean, if you're going to be an artist, you're going to have a career, creating designs and doing that kind of stuff. Like, it's just kind of part of the whole world that you're in. There is just that aspect to it. And, going through it so many times, like, if it was that traumatic all the time, you'd probably just quit and give up. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And, I know time and time again, through the course of my life, there'll be more rejections, and I'm kind of like, bring it on, because it might, I've also got to be open to the thought that it might be me. I might be putting forward a really crappy idea. And if that's the case, I want someone to reject it so that I move on to something else. So, I'm also mindful that not everything I put out is going to be the greatest idea. And so it does help fine tune that a little bit too. But I think you also feel that in your heart, like, when you put something out there, whether you want to push through the rejection, whether it's worth fighting for. And I think that kind of comes with, well, probably age is you refine your sense of taste and style, and you get a better idea of what's right for you, and which things you really want to fight for and push through those hard times for. And I suppose I don't wish, I'm thinking about my younger self as an artist. I don't wish that I had that resilience then, because I think that going through that process of discomfort with rejection is actually really important.
Yeah.
I'm glad I've got it now, though. My job would be really hard if I hadn't built it up. But and look, I don't share about the rejections that I get. on my social media or anything like that. So,
Right.
maybe I should, maybe that would be comforting to people to know that, it's not all roses behind the scenes. But
Well,
I don't know.
I certainly think there's probably better or worse platforms for those kinds of things. And you're on a podcast right now, and this is the perfect,
Well, that's
this is the
true.
perfect place to discuss sort of the things that you don't, not things that are not necessarily the highlight reel that gets put out by everybody's social media.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That's a good point.
so that's, it's interesting to hear those stories, because I think, other artists will be inspired by it. And, it's one of those things where everything, to someone that's sort of half paying attention, or, putting 5% of their energy on social media or whatever, and all they see is like, oh, this person makes designs and they're really successful, and that's the end of it. And it's like, they don't see the, whatever it is, the 10,000 hours that went into becoming a good artist, and maybe the double that, the 20,000 hours it took of dealing with rejections and no's, and
Totally.
just everything that goes into it. And I think people need to hear those things, because otherwise they just think, oh, this person's got it easy or something.
Oh
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Oh yeah, totally, totally. And look, I have people write to me often and say, I would really like to, you know, work on some collabs and explore my art. And have you got any advice? And or how do I do it? And I think, oh my gosh, like I, I don't want to. I don't want to give you a really simple answer because I don't want to not explain to you that it was really hard to get here.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't want to be seen to be sort of dumping on them a whole life story of trials and tribulations. So
Right.
I always just say to people, just follow your heart and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
That's always my advice. It's that keep going part that's the most important, because if I think back throughout my career, there would be hundreds of moments where, had I not pushed through the difficulty of them, I would have stopped and gone and done something else
Yeah.
that was maybe easier or less emotionally challenging. And I'm just really glad that I did push through, because I live a life that's totally centered around, well, there's things like my family and everything, of course, I hope that goes without saying, but totally centered around my creativity,
Mm-hmm.
which for me is the best way I know how to live a happy life. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, that's good. Um, so if I look at your designs, or if I'm, pretending to be someone that's hadn't been exposed to you before, and I just look at the initial things, I look at, and what I see is very whimsical, very, very much fairy tale, charming, quaint. I can't think of the other words that you use to describe it, but it's very much like a fairy tale.
Mm,
That's kind of the sense that I get, the aesthetic that I get when I look at a lot of your stuff. And you had
mm.
mentioned, you weren't always doing that. Um, so, prior, you were going to punk rock shows, and who knows what you were creating back then. So what, you'd mentioned that you did go to university. What did you study in university?
Uh, I have a bit of a long list of courses that I did.
Uh-huh.
So when I first got out of high school, I got accepted into two different courses. One was advertising at RMIT. That was one of those notoriously difficult courses to get into. You had to sit all these sort of exams, and it was a hard one to get into. So when I got in, I was really, really, I suppose, proud of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my gut feeling. Oh, not my gut feeling. My ego was like, yes, we'll do that one. And then I also got into fine arts at Monash, which, I mean, it's a folio-based entry. But it was what I really loved to do. It was a painting and drawing degree.
When you say folio
And
based, does that mean you're submitting your portfolio, and only if they like your stuff do you get in?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so it's not based on like your academic score or anything like that. So you don't have to be necessarily book smart to get in. You've just got to produce a body of work that I suppose they can see potential in.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into the fine arts course, and I just sat on that for a little while and thought, well, here, if I do advertising, there'll be this set in stone kind of career for me. And then there's just this thing at me saying, but if you do that, you're going to want to go and do the fine arts degree one day again anyway. And if that's the one you really want to do, why are you going to wait until you're, after your career's over to come back as a mature age student and finally fulfill your dreams of studying fine arts? I was like, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to do that one that I really actually want to do, even though it has no real sort of career path that's, I suppose, easy or not. How do I put that?
No, I mean, that makes total sense. It's not a clear path. You go to advertising and then you go from there and you can get in, work at a marketing
job in
agency.
A firm. Yeah.
And when you get a fine arts degree and it's like, okay, you can go home and paint your pictures or, who knows what you can do. It's not so clear for sure. I totally get that.
Yes. So I went with a fine arts degree, and a lot of serendipitous things happened throughout that course that I think, really put me in good stead for sort of where I am now. And one of the examples is the university I was at set up a campus in Italy, and it cost $6,000 to go to do a semester studying fine arts in Italy. And so for me, that was like a dream.
For how long?
For a semester. So it was about 2.5, 3 months.
Okay.
And my family didn't have the money for me to go and do that. And I didn't have the money to send myself. And then they announced that there was a $3,000 scholarship that they were offering to anyone. It wasn't like you had to sort of win the scholarship. It was just like basically anyone that wants to go will contribute $3,000 towards it because they wanted to encourage people into the program. So I thought, all I need to do to be able to take that is find another $3,000. Anyway, that week my mum got a call from this random sort of superannuation finding agency that said, we've found an account that you set up for your daughter in like 1985, and it's got $3,000 in it. It's a bank account you set up for your daughter when in the 1980s, and my mum had forgotten about it. And so all of a sudden I had the $6,000, and so I went to Italy. And
talk about meant to be.
I know, right? And I had some experiences there that were really life-changing, and I that sort of set me on a course to go on to do some of the different things that I've done in my life.
Where in Italy did you go?
The campus was in a little town called Prato. I believe that it still runs like 21 or 22 years later. It's just outside Florence.
Okay.
And so there's like a fine art school there. And I lived in this little hotel around the corner from it. It was all very lovely. And I also then came back after finishing my fine arts degree and did find myself in that position where I thought, what am I going to do with my life now? So I went and studied interior design, and I did a year of that, and it was not for me, which is weird because I love interiors, but the actual course was all about, how to measure curtains to, how many meters of fabric you'll need to create this particular pleat at the top. And I'm not a maths person.
A bit more mechanical, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't hugely creative. There was a subject there that we did called colour, just very simply, and that was incredible. I learnt a lot there, and colour's really become something that I'm extraordinarily passionate about. So
I saw you playing with the paint stuff on your Instagram stories.
Oh yeah, that was heaven, absolute heaven. And then I studied. I have to try and remember. I did a teaching degree, and I went and taught art at my old high school for a couple of years, and then I did illustration at TAFE, and that was actually one of the best courses that I did. shout out to Chisholm Frankston TAFE. There was a couple of teachers there, especially a lady called Fran, who was really supportive of my work and great encourager. And anyway, it was from that course that I ended up getting my first freelance job, and that was because the creative director of a company called Smiggle attended our graduate show and saw my work there, and he then asked me to do their Christmas window that year.
Oh, wow.
And so off I went.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to just pull out of what you said a few minutes ago was how you had mentioned that you kind of have to, you lose your ego in some ways when it comes to putting stuff out, because you had mentioned, maybe I'm not putting out the best thing, maybe, and the ability to sort of look at yourself that way and lose your ego and go like, well, maybe I'm wrong, I think is very important, especially in terms of listening to the market and going like, well, I think this thing's great, but for whatever reason, people aren't responding, and maybe it's because it's not as great as I think it is. So I think that's really an important part of your journey. So I just wanted to like pull that out before I forgot about it. But also, so you've gone through university and you've learned certain skills, I'm sure, and gotten an education and been inspired in Italy and all this kind of stuff. What I really wanted to find out, so you mentioned you basically got your first freelance job, and I wanted to find out, like, when does Fleur Harris's whimsical style come to be? When is that transition? Is it part of this first freelance gig? Are you finding your niche, or does it come later? What are you doing when you do this freelance thing?
I'm doing a bold red and white graphic picture of scissors, and
Okay,
it looks nothing like what
nothing
I
like
do
your
now.
style. So how do you discover your style? When does this happen? I have a feeling it has maybe something to do with motherhood.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose insert however many years it was, 8 or so years of working for different fashion retailers and designing prints for garments and having to design always to other people's briefs. I had different freelance clients as well. I used to have an illustration agent, so I was just forever creating work to other people's briefs.
Mm-hmm.
And I then found myself pregnant and quit my job. I was the head of design for a homewares company. And I thought, if ever I'm going to do freelance, or not freelance work, if ever I'm going to do this art career thing on my own, I think I need to get started on it now, not once the baby arrives, because I'm not going to be able to do anything then.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was only about 7 weeks pregnant, I came home and said to my husband, I've quit my job. So I'd just thrown away my maternity leave. And he looked at me with a slight look of concern on his face, but said, it's all right, I trust you. He's used to me making rash, impulsive decisions. So I just thought, okay, here I am. I've got time. I've got kind of 7.5 months to myself. Let's see what I can do. And so I just sat down and started creating some art that just spoke to my heart. And I thought about my childhood growing up, and I thought about the books I used to read, and I thought about the bedtime stories my parents would tell me. My dad used to tell his great made-up stories, and I just used to live for them. It was one of my favourite parts of the day. And I just started creating this artwork that was just inspired by all those nostalgic, beautiful feelings. And that was the Woodlands artwork that Milton and Kim, have as a wallpaper now. And it had been released as a wallpaper not long after that, and had become quite popular around the world. And in one of my previous jobs at a fashion retailer, I had a woman who was our GM there, who had gone on to become the head of product at the Australian retailer Adairs, and I had got in touch with her and said to her, look, I've created this wallpaper. The design is really popular. I think it would be really amazing on bedding for children. And so she introduced me to their buyer, Charlotte, and Charlotte could also see the potential in it. And so Adairs put it into a collaborative collection, so a Fleur Harris Adairs Kids range, and we released it as our first children's bedding collection with matching wall art and play tent and other things 6 years ago, and it became their best-selling kids bedding collection just about straight away. And then that really then sort of, I suppose, set the wheels in motion for not just my relationship with them, but then also producing a lot more art of that type of style, I suppose.
So a couple of questions. So were you basically acting as your own agent at that point? Were you called to Dares personally, or?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, so you were
Yeah.
a one-woman show.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'm not afraid to do is go out and find out who I need to talk to and ask them the questions I think I need to ask to see if I can make my dreams come true.
That's so good.
I've got no worries about doing that because I'm not intimidated by anybody. We're all human, and you know, I figure if you don't ask, the answer's already no.
Yeah.
So and I suppose that's why, because I am so forthcoming with putting myself out there, I suppose that does then lend itself to being rejected more, because the more you like we were talking about rejection before, the more times you ask, the more times you're likely to get rejected. So when I say I've been rejected hundreds of times, it's because I've probably asked, hundreds of times, and approach people. So that's just kind of in my nature.
I think that's so good, though. I think that sort of fearlessness is inspiring. I mean, even to me when I hear it, I go, yeah, that's right. You should just, who do I need to speak to make my dreams come true?
Yeah.
I think this really comes down to that.
and that's only, if there's someone that I need to make that happen. If I can make them happen on my own, I will, of course. But, in the case of a collaboration or something like that, you do need to have it approved with. But,
you don't own the bedding store. You need to talk to somebody.
That's right. Yeah. And,
okay. And so, but also you're saying that did that first collaboration, that sort of cemented your style because you thought, this is working?
Yeah, well, it was already really popular in the wallpaper, and I had released a second design, which was the In the Woods design, that was a similar style, but less floral, more foresty, and that was going really well as well. And so I suppose then I just thought, okay, well, and this is when I started getting all this beautiful feedback from people, and people telling me how much they loved it and were connecting with the art. So that then definitely put me on that trajectory to create more art in that style. And
it's interesting because I thought maybe perhaps Motherhood would have made it so that you were sort of drawing that kind of stuff, but it was actually just the fact that you were pregnant and at home, and you said, I needed to get something, like I've got a short window to make something happen. So it wasn't actually what I thought. Like, you weren't necessarily inspired by the pregnancy. You were more just the pregnancy.
There's a bit of desperation to,
it's
to sort my life out there.
Wow.
Well, but it was also a reflective time, because truth be told, I'd never yearned to be a mother. I've always loved children, but I didn't have this huge maternal instinct. It was more, I hadn't wanted to get married either. But I'd done that, and then, and very happily. And then it was kind of like, all right, not getting any younger, but, I've got this amazing husband. It'd be sad if this man did not have a child. He's too good a person. So I was kind of like,
that's very sweet.
Let's have a baby. There needs to be another one of you in this world. So, anyway, we have one beautiful child, and I love him to bits. And he is the reason, I suppose, I came to this place in my artwork. So I look forward to really sharing that with him when he's at an age where he'll really understand it.
Yeah.
I don't think he's 7 now, and sometimes I talk to him about it, but it doesn't really register. He's sort of like, yeah, let's play footy.
Right. I suppose that maybe, you tell me if I'm wrong, but looking at your designs, the ones that you would have made while you were pregnant before your little boy arrived would have been they seem to be more of the feminine ones, and then all of a sudden you got dinosaurs and adventure things.
Yeah.
So is that a result of him?
I suppose possibly, but also I never really thought about designing, this is for boys or this is for girls. As a child myself, I was very much a tomboy.
Yeah.
So when I used to, dress, I was quite boyish, and so for me, I've always never really designed, thinking, oh, this is for girls or boys. But then after we started releasing different bedding collections, there was this feedback from customers to release something as part of our collaboration that was more geared towards boys. And so hence I started to explore some themes. I actually got feedback from a whole lot of kids that I spoke to, and like, if you could have your dream bedroom, what would you have in there? And I had a whole lot of these little boys tell me all the things that they would love. And so that's how I made the Adventureland artwork, was I just basically illustrated all the things that they had told me.
Oh, that's cool.
And so it was never really meant to be, for boys. But once, when I asked a whole lot of little boys about what they'd love in their rooms, that they told me, and I drew it.
Yeah.
We did then use the same artwork on the Fleur Harris apparel collection. And when we shot that, though, we photographed some little girls in the same print. And, it works just as well for girls as well, too.
Yeah.
And I'm always really heartened when I hear from a parent whose little girl has the dinosaur bedding or the dinosaur wallpaper in their room. I love that, I love that it's, people are playing outside this, the stereotypes of themes that, the world has, sort of guided them to be into.
I'd love to touch on
I like to think my art's for everyone. Whoever wants to enjoy
whoever
it,
likes it,
please go for it.
I wanted to touch on a couple of the designs specifically. So In the Woods was one of your first ones, right?
Yes.
I love that design. It's so very lush. I did want to ask you kind of what did inspire that? Because a lot of the animals that are in this aren't in Australia. So how did you get inspired to do this design? Or what elements what were you looking at for inspiration when you were creating it?
There used to be a walk that I would do from our family's vineyard to my neighbour's house. Now, when I say neighbour, she was like 2 kilometres away. She was the closest child to me. It was probably even further than that. And they had a property called Brackenwood that was just covered in bracken. And I just used to love doing that walk because I would find all that bracken and as you say, it's such lush sort of foresty foliage. It was just always so magical to walk through, and I just used to daydream my way through, that walk. And so I suppose when I wanted to create a more foresty version of the woodlands, that those memories kind of informed a lot of that. And I suppose that setting to me, once it all started to become very green and, I love mushrooms and toadstools and things, so I put some of them in there too. It doesn't feel right to put a koala in there.
There's a raccoon in there. And I was like, wait a minute.
So I suppose I tailored the animals to suit the landscape. And I love all of those, European and American sort of woodland animals. I think they're so beautiful. And maybe it's because they appear in a lot of, the Disney sort of...
Bambi.
Yeah, exactly. That when I think of woodlands, I do often think of, more of those creatures, the squirrels and raccoons
Yeah.
and things like that. And there's something really playful about those types of animals too. I love our deer koalas, and we have with Milton and King the Bush Babies and Bush Melody collection with the Australian animals.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something extra cheeky about some of those woodland animals that I really love illustrating, and I think that people enjoy being surrounded by as well.
Yeah. Speaking of designs that little girls love, I love the Field of Dreams.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I
I'm
love that
definitely
one
not a little
too.
girl, and I love that
Yeah.
design. No, I just love it's to me that one's just so magical and so cool. I wish I had more images of people having it in their homes. I really want to see that design used a lot more. So I hope people check that out.
Yeah,
Any
it is a
thoughts
beautiful
or
one. I'm glad you love it. I love it too.
stories about the creation of that one, Field of Dreams with the unicorns?
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think back to it. So it's got lots of things going on in it. It's got little fairies. I don't know if you've ever noticed there's some tiny little
No, I
fairies
don't
in
think I
there.
have noticed that, but now I'm going to look at it and zoom
Yeah, I
in.
love hiding little details in my art for people to find. And often I don't even mention that they're in there. I just let people, I almost prefer that one day they'll be looking at it and just think, oh,
I do see the fairies.
there's something
Okay. Because
new.
I noticed the butterflies and stuff, but actually I just noticed the fairies. That's really cool. I love stuff
Yeah,
like that, little Easter eggs that you find.
yeah, totally. And who was the model for the fairies was me with a selfie video on doing fairy moves in my
Oh,
kitchen.
really?
Yeah. Well, when you work by yourself most of the time, you sometimes got to be your own model. So,
How funny.
yeah, my camera's full of lots of me doing fairy poses. Um, whatever it takes, Chris.
Yeah. No, I love it.
um,
It's really, really pretty.
And there's also, strawberries in there. I mean, at the time, we're actually growing little strawberry plants in our backyard. And that was because I had been to a friend of mine's wedding, and it was in her parents in law's backyard. And the mother had this amazing garden that was all these cottage style flowers, but then underneath was all planted out with vegetables and lots of strawberries and chives and herbs. And I just was spent a lot of time distracted by this garden that was just this absolutely gorgeous mix of, um, flowering plants and then also vegetables and herbs. It was
Mm-hmm.
so cute. And so that inspired me to include some of those sorts of things in that Field of Dreams artworks, the strawberries along with the roses and the blossoms and things
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think it might be my favorite one,
Oh,
just
I love that.
personally.
Oh, I'm
Um,
thrilled. Thank you.
and then, but what's funny is the one that seems to be the most popular, the one I get asked most about, is the garden party. That's
Oh,
the one
yeah.
that people seem to like. I see that a lot on Instagram. People are using it a lot. So, I mean, maybe people are using the other ones, but in terms of what I see, because I'm not seeing what necessarily comes off the printer all the time. But in terms of what people are posting, I see the
Mm,
garden party one quite a bit.
it's a really fun one. It's kind of got, you know, it's full of those magical details that we were talking about before. Like even there's an old sort of royal looking tea set in there, and if you look really really closely, there's even this tiny little frog and a mouse princess looking like they're kind of getting married or in love or something on the tea set as like a tiny little detail. Um,
I love getting these
and
little secret tips from you. Now that
yeah,
to look for.
yeah, I hide all sorts of stuff in there. Even like the little bunting flags, they're only small, but each one of them has its own individual textile design that I've created for it, like its own unique little pattern on each bit of fabric for the bunting flags.
Mm-hmm.
I just, I don't know, I love finding those kind of details in artworks, and so I
Yeah.
also love putting them in there. Um, it makes it a lot more fun to, it makes me more excited when I share it with people, is sort of just waiting for them to have that moment of surprise and delight when it all starts to dawn on them how much is going on in there.
Yeah. And then my other favorite, I have to say, is, and this maybe is a bit more boyish. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Is the treasure reef. I don't know if
Oh,
it's just me that
yeah.
I feel like I like fish, marine related designs, but I don't see them all that often.
Yeah,
Um,
I suppose it's an unusual one for interiors in that it hasn't been a huge trend over the last few years
Yet.
yet. But I'm personally very passionate about the Great Barrier Reef. I do a lot of work with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation.
Yeah.
And we had, when I was working with the Des, a lot of requests for an ocean themed collection.
Hmm.
And so that design really came about sort of by customer request, I suppose.
Okay.
And that was a fascinating one to create because I often, I never try and create, absolutely scientifically, anatomically correct interpretations of animals or plants.
Mm-hmm.
But I did feel like for the fish, I needed some sort of, I don't know, level of accuracy, at
Mm-hmm.
least for the inspiration. So I spent a lot of time watching videos of the reef on YouTube. Like I would just sit there illustrating with these hours long videos of fish swimming around. And it was such a beautiful way to create art. It was just with the sound of the bubbles and
Yeah.
the fish swimming around. My gosh, it was gorgeous. It was one of the most enjoyable artworks that I've created. I'd kind of, for some reason at the time, I think I started listening to a lot of the Little Mermaid soundtrack just to kind of spark the mood, and then that inspired a whole lot of Disney soundtracks, which I don't normally listen to a lot of, but I spent most of that artwork either watching fish videos or listening to the Disney soundtracks. So it
Yeah.
was a really
From
fun
punk
one to
rock to
make.
Disney.
Yeah,
Have you
everything.
been to the Great Barrier Reef?
Yeah, I have a few times.
It ruins snorkeling for everywhere else you might want to go.
Uh, well, oh gosh, it's a really one that like kills me to think about it. There's so many parts of it that are seriously damaged, and I think because I did see it, as a child, and then going and visiting it over the years, and you can start to notice the deterioration. Um, that really breaks my heart, and so that's inspired me to want to support the Great Barrier Reef Foundation in some of the volunteer work that I do for them. And so yeah, the Treasure Reef artwork is a little nod to my love of the reef.
That's so cool. I love it.
Mm.
Are there anything in particular, like that, sort of like a through line? Well, either a through line or anything in particular that you specifically love designing. Like I've talked to some artists where they say like, oh, I hate drawing birds because they're actually way harder to draw than you might think, or something like that. Is there something that you tend to lean towards just naturally, that you, whether it's florals or animals or anything like that? Like, is there something that you sort of or naturally gravitate towards just for the love of it, or just because you're fascinated by it?
Yeah, look, one thing I would say I definitely don't gravitate towards is drawing people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they just don't, with the exception of a fairy. Winged people are okay, but I just don't really put people in my art so much.
If you don't have wings, you're
Um,
out.
that's right. Um, I don't know why. Animals are so much more fun to draw and so much more diverse. There's, of course, between all of us humans, we all have our unique traits, but certainly not to the extent that animals do. Um, and the thing about a flower is, I can draw the same flower 50 times, and every time I draw that flower, it will look a little bit different just
Mm-hmm.
because it might start to, if I've cut it and brought it inside, it'll actually start dying before my eyes, and it's
Right.
changing. Or if I go and look at a flower in my garden one day, it looks completely different the next day. It might have come into bloom from just being a bud the day before. So I find them a lot more interesting, quite frankly, than people to draw.
Mm-hmm.
And there is this whole in my garden, there are all these little mini ecosystems that exist. Like there might be a cooler part of the garden where there's more mosses and things growing, and then there might be a part that gets lots of sun that has flowers and butterflies always gravitating around it. And to go for a wander through this very small but abundant part of my house, the front garden, is like going on a little environmental adventure. And just a little lap around my garden outside my studio will give me so much inspiration. And so I suppose having that being drawn into nature that way is something I find really enjoyable. And to go outside and sit on my front veranda and draw and be completely surrounded by bees and, occasionally at times lots of butterflies. Like there really is nothing quite like just sitting in nature like that. And you feel this very special sense of magic. And so for me, I definitely gravitate towards celebrating that magic that can be experienced when you really sit down and connect with nature.
Well, magic is definitely a constant theme that runs through a lot of your designs. You do feel that sense of awe and fantasy and magic throughout your designs, which I think is so very cool. I've
Thank
already
you.
kept you an hour, but I just had two sort of final questions for you. If you have a couple more minutes.
I've got all the time in the world for you, Chris.
Thank you.
I'm loving this chat. We can keep going.
So you like you said, you had a dares and you had the bedding. I'm not familiar with everything you have going on, but you do seem to have lots of like partnerships and things where people can get complimenting, whether it's bedding or curtains or things like that. What are some of because I saw you did the one with the bush babies, and there was clothing and all sorts of things. Can you just mention some of the things, some of the partnerships that you have? So if someone had a wallpaper and they also wanted to get the, accompanying matching whatever it is, where
Sure.
they can find that stuff?
Dress their baby to match their wallpaper.
Yeah.
I can help with that. So I work with a wonderful team here in Melbourne to produce the Fleur Harris baby and children's apparel collection.
Mm-hmm.
That's sold in David Jones and on the Iconic and at fleurharris.com, where you can also get the Milton King Fleur Harris wallpaper, as well as through the Milton King website. And yeah, we use a lot of my artworks to create beautiful apparel collections for babies and children. So often a lot of the prints that you might see on wallpaper or bedding will show up in other places too. So like on the apparel, or I've just done an Easter collection with Godiva chocolates. So they had a lot of my artworks on there too that also show up on the apparel. So because I work with lots of different partners and across lots of different product categories, you will see my artworks pop up in different iterations, around the world. And I love that. It's nice to have that variation and flexibility because, not everyone may, have children to dress, but they may have an interior that they want to fit out so they can connect with my art that way, or vice versa. So it's really nice working with lots of different businesses, and I'm always really, what do you say, fussy with the businesses that I work with. They've got to be nice people,
Mm-hmm.
and they've got to produce beautiful quality product. So they're kind of my first two things I look at, and of course then the ethical sourcing and all of those other really important things that live in my decision making process too. But nice people and quality product are at the forefront of me deciding who I work with.
Well, it's just cool to be able
Milton
to.
and King certainly tick that box.
Well, thank you. It's just cool to be able to kind of, I don't know, when you're theming a room or something, it's nice to be able to just it's nice to be able to tie it all together in some way.
For sure. And I think that maximalist look is always appealing. Personally, I love it. I grew up in a bedroom that had curtains that matched the wall frieze and matched the bedding, and I just loved that. And so being able to offer that to people who really want that all-encompassing look is really cool to be able to do.
Now, you mentioned like companies like David Jones, which is Australian. Is this stuff available in the US as well, or is it just, would they get it through your website?
Yeah, so we ship to the US from fleurharris.com. We've got lots of beautiful customers in the US. Hello to my friends in the USA. And it's been amazing seeing the wallpaper installed in so many homes in the USA too. That is just so cool to see. I love America, and so it's really nice to see that my art is being enjoyed over there. It's really exciting.
Yeah. All right. So fleurharris.com is where they would go to find those other sort of elements outside the wallpaper that are with maybe other partners and things like that to sort of tie it all
Yeah,
together and bring things together in a cohesive way.
yeah. And then anything else that I'm doing, I also update on my Instagram, which is in my name, Fleur Harris. So come and visit me there and say hello. We've got a beautiful community of lovely people there. It's a
Amazing.
troll-free zone.
That's good.
Come and enjoy.
And then I guess the last thing that I wanted to ask you is, do you have any new designs coming up, or what's on the horizon for you?
Well, I may have just sent to Bryce this week a new design because as part of this renovation, I am absolutely going to include some wallpaper in the interior fit out. And I'm doing this little powder room up. It's tiny. And that said, it's probably the room I'm having the most fun designing. There's going to be a lot going on in this tiny space. And I actually did even look around at some other wallpapers to see if I could find something to use in there, and I couldn't quite find just what I was after. So of course that's old story. You couldn't find what you're looking for, so you made it yourself. So I've created a brand new wallpaper design with this powder room as the driving sort of force behind it, and I love it. I'm really excited about it, and hopefully it's something that we can bring to market with Milton and King.
So is this going to
So
be just a one-off, or is this inspiring like a whole line collection, or?
at the moment, it's just the one. So when I create one of my artworks, they do take quite a while. If you look at them, you'll see it's quite a lot of detail in them, as we've discussed. So I will start with this one in hopefully a few colorways, and then I might do some variations on it as well. And then so that's the one I'm feeling super excited about at the moment because I've never actually had, except for when I've styled photo shoots in my house, I've never actually had my own wallpaper in my home as a permanent fixture. So I'm really excited with this renovation to have it. It'll be in the powder room, and then I'm also wanting to do another room with possibly woodlands. I'm thinking maybe in that antique colorway. I'm not quite sure yet.
Is there any sort of
dark one.
Is there any hint that you can give us without giving it away, like just a little teaser of what this new design is, like either the theme or the?
Totally. So it may come as a huge shock when I say it's got a lot of flowers in it, but they are all flowers of different significance to me. So my dad, who passed away about 15 years ago, was just the coolest man. He planted a whole lot of poppies in our family home. If you have time, I'll tell you this story very quickly.
Sure.
After we left that family home, the lovely people that had moved in there very thoughtfully brought us some of the poppies as a bouquet to be like, here's some of your dad's poppies that he'd planted. And unbeknownst to me, my husband had kept the pods once they'd dried and kept some of the seeds for me and then planted them in our garden. And so this incredibly beautiful moment one day when my husband was like, look what's growing in our garden. These are your dad's poppies from the house that you grew up in. So I got so excited about this and emotional and all the things. And so we kept getting more of these seeds. And one year I just filled my front garden with poppies, and I was sharing them on Instagram, and somebody wrote to me and said, "Do you know they're the opium poppies?" And with that, I was, I didn't know. So they sent me an article where this woman had had her flower farm cleared out by the agricultural governing body for having these illegal flowers. Anyway, I called our local, whoever they are, the agriculture police, and they were like, "Yeah, they're illegal. You're not allowed to have them in your garden." So I took a whole lot of photos and then ripped them all out, and it was really sad.
So they're going to live on in your design, are they?
So they're in the wallpaper. So there's a whole lot of beautiful poppies, and there's lots of flowers. They're all, just about all of them are flowers that have grown in the studio garden outside my art studio. And so because this artwork has been, designed to go in my home, a lot of them, I really like that connection, that the flowers that'll be on the wall inside the house are ones that have also grown in the garden out the front.
Mm-hmm. And were from your dad.
Yeah.
How
and
cool.
then, and then there are a few other magical little elements sprinkled in there too. But predominantly for this one, it is all floral. So
amazing. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I can't wait to show you. Hopefully Bryce lets us turn it into a wallpaper.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm working on him.
Amazing. Well, yeah, I can't wait to see it. I'm so excited. Well, we should definitely, thank you for joining me, by the way. And we should definitely connect in the future, even if it's just a short 10, 15-minute podcast, either when your design comes out or when another collection comes out, just to kind of touch base and get you to talk all about, what's new.
I would love that, Chris. It's been really, really lovely talking to you today. Thank you for being such a gracious host. And it's, lovely working with Milton and King. It was fun talking all things design with you today.
Thanks, Fleur.
Thank you, Chris.
Bye.
Bye-bye.